Hey guys, Shane here at CrossFit Jeff, helping you go further, faster in fitness. And today's Shane Talks is all about taking advice from people who never take advice. Now, we've all met these people. These people will be the first to run over to you and tell you exactly what they think you should do, how you should do what they see to be the right way of doing something. They will give you advice on what you're wearing, what colors you're wearing. They'll give you advice on what you're eating for lunch. They'll give you advice on the diet that you might be trying to live by, on the way you're trying to train and exercise. And yet when you look at their life, when you go, thanks for your advice, and you turn the camera back around on them and say, okay, but all of the advice everybody in the world has ever given you, you've decided never to ever take anyway. And a lot of the things that you are talking about and giving advice to me, you're not even doing those things. And so it reminds me that not all of the advice that you receive or that I receive needs to be reacted to. I'm somebody who can sometimes find myself reacting quite emotionally and quickly to any type of criticism or advice or things of that nature. Someone might tell me something about my appearance and then I will think about it, and then maybe react to it. Normally I get over it, but that's generally what happens. And so I wanted to bring this podcast up because it's a reminder to you guys and to myself, like all of these podcasts I do, it's more of a chat to me, and I share that with the world, that not all of the advice that someone gives you is good advice. And to my actual quote, let me read it again. Stop taking advice from people who don't take it themselves. So they might be telling you to do A, B, and C, and yet they've never done it. They might be telling you that your idea is terrible, and that you should never execute on this idea, and yet they've never made a decision on anything in the past that would give them the legs to stand on to be able to offer that advice. My biggest one, I guess, is always with food. People are so quick to give advice on whether or not something is good or bad. And yet when you turn the camera around and you have a look into their lives, their cupboard, their pantry, their habits are full of holes. And I always wonder, if they're so freely giving out advice, if they're so freely and happily telling everybody else around them what they should and shouldn't do, surely there should be a level of accountability to themselves that they're doing somewhat of what they're telling the world to do. So I always do this. I look at a few different things when someone gives me advice. I look at the source of the advice. Who is the advice coming from? What is their intention? Because sometimes people will give you advice with the intention, and this might not be a conscious intention, but the intention of not letting you prosper, not letting you succeed, not letting you move forward. And they don't even realize they do that. So the source, who's the advice coming from? What's their intention behind giving you the advice? And I always look at the runs on the board, so to speak, from the person giving the advice. In the past, when they have given advice to others, has that advice been good for those other people? Do they have a group or a circle of people around them who benefit highly or a lot of the time from their advice? Or do they have no one around them listening to them? It's like the guys that stand in the middle of the street ranting and raving about all sorts of things, the world ending and the terrible things that are happening in the world, and just raving and raving and raving. And they're not getting any group, any following, because what they're saying is just so far off any type of logical steps, logical thought. They are trying to create this massive amount of attention. They're trying to give all these people around them this advice, and yet no one's listening because they've got no runs on the board. Maybe sometimes if you're going to give advice, what you should be able to do is walk out there and start living at least slightly by some of the things that you're talking about. Maybe you would have a following of people who tell you that your advice has helped them in the past. So when I'm looking at others, because I get a lot of advice about a lot of things in my life, and that might be career, relationship, financial, exercise, health, nutrition. I subscribe to a lot of people talking at me about all of those things in life on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, my friend circle. Everyone has advice and opinions, but I've got to look at the source, who's talking, what are their intentions behind their advice. What runs do they have on the board? What have they done in the past that's helped them succeed? What have they done in the past to help others? Do they have a following? And sometimes they're all different amounts of value, right? If you have a big following, that doesn't mean I'm going to listen to you. So sometimes if you have a big following, that doesn't make me any more confident in your advice. I know a lot of people who have interesting things to say who have big followings that I don't necessarily agree with. So there's different weights, right? So that might weigh differently in my thought process of whether or not I'm going to listen to their advice. But I always really look at the biggest thing as the source of the integrity of the person. Is mostly what they're doing and saying about with their own life paying off. Runs on the board. Have they scored some runs on the board? Have they actually made change in their lives, in others' lives? Is there something that you can go, yes, when they gave that advice to this person, it paid off. And when they've given that advice before globally, they've been right. So I probably bring this up more so now than ever because, winter, coming out of winter, we go into spring and summer, and there's all sorts of things with the health and fitness industry that's going to come out. There's always things in the health and fitness industry that are contradicting. So it's really important that you think about these things. Now, I'm not saying my advice when I give it is right. This advice right now, I'm literally giving advice on how to take advice. But that doesn't mean it's right, and it might not be right for you. So with the advice topic, and when you take advice and stuff like that, I think it's just good to have your own checkboxes, so to speak, your own things that you look for in an individual. And if they tick at least most of those boxes, or at least some of those boxes are weighted quite heavily in what you believe in, then you should follow their advice and then test the waters and then make an educated decision. But solely and ultimately, the responsibility to make the right decision comes down upon you. Don't take advice from someone else and then, it ticked a few of the boxes and it weighted quite well in value for me, and yet still, you need to make decisions, hard, heavy, emotional decisions about where you spend your money, about how you live your life, about the types of things you eat, the types of things that you believe in, your religion, your career. All those things require heavily on you ultimately making the last decision. The decision stops with you. So not only are we going to have a checklist of boxes to tick if we are taking advice, but we also have to implement that advice slowly. And from that advice, from that implementation, then at some point we either go, yes, that we're on the right path and we're going to continue on, trusting, believing, and moving forward with the advice that we've been given and the one that we believe in, or no, it's starting to maybe tear away from what I believe internally, my own thoughts, my own values, my own beliefs. It's not sitting right. I'm going to reconsider that advice. So guys, with today's Shane's Talks, I hope that makes some sense. I hope that helped you understand advice, because we get tons of it in the fitness industry. You're getting it right now, which is, I guess, a little bit of irony in this podcast. But what you want to start to do is to have your own values and thoughts and procedure onto taking and accepting advice and then implementing advice. But don't forget that advice will always stop with you. You need to make that final decision whether or not it is right for you. So keeping all that in mind, guys, I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the gym soon.